Alright, today we are finishing lesson 2, our objectives 22, excuse me. I will be able to analyze and compare statistical graphs using bar graphs, line graphs, circle graphs, and stem and leaf plots. So we looked at a couple of these on Friday. We will finish this out today. So here's an example of a double line graph. We talked about on Friday how a line graph shows changes over time. That's what this is showing, and it's comparing the number of shops that Sal owned and the number of shops that Harry owned. So it says to make a conclusion from this graph. We talked about how a line graph shows changes over time. Just like bar graphs, two related data sets can be compared using a double line graph. So what conclusions can we make from this? One thing I see is that this line is going up by the exact same amount, it looks like, every time, or the exact same amount every time. So that's the conclusion I'm going to make. So Harry's graph is a straight line. Harry's graph is a straight line showing a steady increase over time. His graph is a straight line which shows a steady increase over time. Basically, it's going up by the exact same amount every time. Now, if you wanted to make different conclusions, you could compare these two, talk about the difference in the number that Sal showed in, or excuse me, Sal is here. Sal sold in 2001 to the number that Harry sold in 2001. You could compare the number they sold in 2002. You could say that Harry sold more in each year except for in 2004 when they sold the same amount. This is just one conclusion that I'm making. So flip to the back. This says the table shows Andre's bank account transactions. It wants us to make a graph comparing deposits and withdrawals. So what we could do, since we have several different variables, we've got months and then we've got deposits and withdrawals, what we could do is we could make a bar graph. You've got a big graph here. So what we're going to do is make us a bar graph. And since we have both deposits and withdrawals, what we could do is we can put a double bar graph. So one line would represent deposits, or one bar would represent deposits, the other would represent withdrawals. So let's put months right here. January, February, March, April, May, June. Okay, so we've got several different variables that we're comparing. So in January, we can make one bar for deposits, one bar for withdrawals. We've got intervals, looks like between 100 and 500, so we could count up by 100 each time. So 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600. So this is going to be on the y-axis. I've got dollars. On the y-axis, I've got dollars. On the x-axis, I have months. Okay, so in January, my deposits were $475. So I'm going to go up to about $475, put a bar, bring it down. Then my withdrawals were 100. So I'm going to go up to 100, draw a bar, bring it down. But I need a way to differentiate between the two. So I'm going to color in, I'm going to shade in my deposits, and then leave my withdrawals blank. Now if I do that, what I've got to do is make a key that shows the difference. So I'm going to draw this right here. Here's my key. This, a box. This represents deposits. This represents with. Try to spell that right. Withdrawals. Okay, so the shaded represents deposits, the blank represents withdrawals. I could do the same thing for each month. So February, my deposits were at 200, so let's go to 200. Draw a bar, fill it in. Alright, My withdrawals were at 275, so bring that up some. This is making it so we can really easily compare these two. We can see in which month he had more deposits and which month he had more withdrawals. So March, I've got 350 for deposits. So we go to 350. Since we're filling in deposits, I'll shade that in. And then I'm going to leave withdrawals at 350 as well, but I'll leave that blank. Alright, then in April, my deposits were at 425. So I go up to 425, make my bar. I'm going to fill this one in. Hopefully y'all's will be a little bit straighter than mine. Fill that in because deposits, we remember, are filled in, and we're leaving withdrawals as blank. Let me try to straighten that up a little bit because that's crooked. Crooked, crooked, crooked. Alright, withdrawals in April were what? 400. Go to 400. Leave it blank. Two more. May, we've got deposits of 500. Oh, let's make sure you can see that. May, my deposits were 500, so go to 500. Fill that in. Actually, here, let's try to make a little bit of space in between these two so we can easily see the difference, because that's starting to look like a histogram. So make sure we got a little bit of space in between them. You want a space in between the months. You don't want your months to run together like mine were starting to do. You can have these two sort of run together. There needs to be a difference between the months. Alright, so that's May. And then in May, my withdrawals were at 200. Leave that blank. Leave the second one blank. And then in June, my deposits were 150. Shade that in. My withdrawals were 225. Bring that up to here. Leave it blank. So there's my double bar graph. I would go back and make sure there's a little bit of space in between the two. Make sure they don't bleed together like mine were doing, because they only bleed together if it's a histogram. And since this is a bar graph, you want a little space in between them. So now I've got space in between all of them. I am good. The last one says to... What is the last one? Oh, we're running out of time, so we won't do this last one. Well, actually, we'll do one small part of the last one, but we won't do the whole thing. This circle graph shows Art Online's total yearly sales by quarter. The total amount of sales for the quarter was 20 million. Find the sales for, instead of each quarter, let's say for the first quarter. We're just going to find sales for the first quarter. So in the first quarter, what it tells me is that I sold 12% of the total amount. So the total amount that I sold was 20 million. So what I've got to do is find 12% of 20 million. So 12% of 20 million. Okay? To find that, this word of we talked about before means multiply. So a percent is always out of 100, so you could write as a decimal. 0.12 multiplied by 20. If I go to the side right here, I got 20 times 12, 0, 4, oops, 4, 0, 0, 2. 24. Remember, I've got a decimal, so I want to count over 2 places to the right. So 1, 2. So that would give me 2 4/10 million. So, first quarter sales here is 2 4/10 million. You would do the same thing to find each quarter, but since we're running out of time, we only found the first. That should be all for this lesson.